Hello, everybody. This is ASC European Division, and this is the fourth quarter ASC Web Window 2019, and it is regarding railroad transportation. So quite often processes in railroad transportation are still handled manual today. And these processes by which wagons depart or arrive, or when and where they're still on the track, described with manual data entries. And as you all know, manual data entries are sometimes not very precise and definitely not real time. So other transport systems are more advanced at this point. The description of goods transported by trucks, planes, or ships are real-time available, and that is much more convenient and efficient. So on the other side, rail freight transport is a very environment-friendly resource, and it saves carbon footprint. And that is the reason why we selected the rail transport topic as an important topic for our web window. And with me today is Vasai Rashid. He is our senior consultant in railroad transportation systems, and he is going to introduce this topic to you. With us, and welcome to everybody, with us are 34 participants. They are following our discussion, and they have, of course, the option to send a question via our online tool to me. And Vasai, be prepared. If I see a nice and important question, I'm going to stop you, and maybe we can answer to the question, and that keeps the discussion a little bit more alive. So that's all from my end here. Vasai, stage is yours. Go ahead with your explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for this amazing introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, today we'll be talking about the North American railways. Why I particularly chose North American railways is that it is a really large market. However, it has been neglected over the number of years, especially with the introduction and the revolution of automotive and aviation industry. And the railways currently in North America is getting sidetracked. As we mentioned, it has become a second priority in terms of mobility. We see a negative trend in the United States and Canada as opposed to the rest of the world, where people are trying to implement much more effective railway systems, and by designing them to help the local population and the citizens. So what happened in America, I'm quickly going to go with the background of how and why it got sidetracked and what was the main reason. And one of the main reasons I see is that because the markets in the North American continent have been more focused on funding towards building more roads, more highway infrastructure to funnel their automotive industry as opposed to the railway industry, the government actually took out funding from the railway sector and reinvested the revenues that were even collected by the railway industry as a sector to fund basically highways and roads. Then came the inception of the NAFTA in 1994 that did result in somewhat inclusivity of economies between Canada and America to offer cross-border services in terms of passenger or goods that were being transported. And what we saw during this time, that there was a certain amount of horizontal integration. Having said that, some mergers and acquisitions that actually expanded somewhat the railway network development within the last century. But we don't see this going forward anymore because of some strict monopolistic regulations implemented by both of these countries. And having said that, America has one of the largest railway networks in the world, even twice as many as China, but the ridership, at least for passengers, is really, really lacking behind. And one of the reasons is that the attention and the focus has entirely shifted, and the perception of the consumer is also shifted, as opposed to using railways and choosing automotive.
Vasai, if I may interrupt you, because I received the first interesting question regarding investments in the North American rail infrastructure.
Go ahead.
And the question is, let's say you get confirmation that, let's say, investments into modern standards are definitely necessary, but the Americans itself are relatively reluctant to using trains instead of their cars. So what else has to be done? What else, I think the meaning is what else instead of investments has maybe to be done to convince Americans to change from their cars to public transportation, and in this case to train systems?
That's a very valid question, and I think this should be very naturally occurring to the American population, that the mass transit can only be supported in the future by a railway system and not by automotive industry or airplanes. And for that, what the Americans need to be convinced is that they need to get more incentives for passengers that need to be around the urban centers for mass transit. And one of the ways is that they could introduce a high-speed railway network that could connect, for example, we see this happening in Texas, that they're connecting Dallas to Houston. That's going to cut a lot of journey time that could have taken at least 4 or 5 hours from the car itself. And as we see, congestion is increasing because of A, growing population, B, urbanization, and once these roads are congested, an average American would really spend at least in a year 7 to 14 days in just traffic, being stuck in traffic, and that just not increases the carbon emission. It's also not that cost efficient because your car is still turned on and it's burning the fuel, so you're still paying for it, but you're not really moving. As opposed to a railway network, you know, you could just go ahead straight from point A to point B without much of a congestion. So these are one of the ways that we could actually attract and change the American perception about the railway industry. Of course, we need to increase the train comfort and the quality of travel within these railways, having much more comfortable seating arrangements, having a space for children to play on board. If you're traveling with family, you could easily work while you're traveling. So in my definition, this is one of the ways of quality of travel that could be increased. Having said that, you don't always need to be attentive or driving on the road or be stuck in a traffic jam, but rather you can still focus if you're commuting from your home to your workplace and you've got a 1 hour journey. In that 1 hour, you could already start working on a project that you were working on yesterday, and without having to worry about where am I going to park my car, how am I going to pay for this, and you know what, I need to go back and change my parking location. And as the congestion has increased, I think shared mobility is gaining a momentum across the world. And last but not least, how can we grow the ridership is that if we do tend to lower the prices of tickets as we do, a part of the ticket is subsidized by the taxpayers and a part of the ticket is subsidized by the passenger. And then the math and the calculus is very simple. If these two come together, I think people would eventually start using railways as in the long run, it is much cheaper. And we've seen those case studies in Europe that even though a lot of people do own cars, but when people are commuting for a meeting or something, an intercity exchange, they prefer to take the railways because they don't have to worry about a lot of different things. And it's from the center of the city to another center of the city. And that the American people and the government needs to work together by building the infrastructure around these business districts, around these urban centers where people have an easier way of mobility.
Yeah, Vasai, that is interesting, and thank you for your first explanation. But now I'm getting a second question. And so investment is necessary without any doubt. I think most of the participants confirm that. But they are really saying here the North American rail market is unprofitable and unprofitable for decades. And is it the right for the government to continue to invest in these money-losing assets, or should they maybe do more cherry picking and just invest in the profitable routes like the Northeast Corridor or something like that? So my understanding is, should they really general invest in the rail system, or is cherry picking recommended?
See, when we get a question like this, we have like two parts of it. In one way, I do agree that we should select the profitable routes, and in the other way, I do also agree that we should not ignore the other places of commuting where you see it's a loss-making sector, because one route or one route is basically profitable, and that profit helps basically the loss-making sector to equalize it. So I think it's not a yes or no question. It's more about getting much more deeper into this, that yes, smaller routes can eventually overcome the loss. But however, I think in the long run, people don't really have a choice because of the climate change, for example. Like, you can't expect people to not pay attention towards this, and they need to basically move towards a railway system that is perhaps in the short run not as profitable, but as the population will grow, as urbanization will become a norm, and like the world will start living in these urban centers, there's no way out of this. The government needs to support and back these railways as they have been doing since the inception of it. And a lot of progress of the American economic development relied on the Industrial Revolution being able to import raw materials and then process it and export finished products. So we're not just looking at only passenger railways, we're looking at freight railways as well. And eventually they don't really have much of a choice. This marginalization of saying, okay, we should only invest on a profitable route is something very short-sighted, in my opinion. And in the long run,
point.
yeah.
So yeah, I think we can summarize it. It's quite simple from my point of view. Cherry picking is not a solution. It has to be a general approach, and we have to balance, let's say, passenger transportation and freight transportation, and it has to be really a common North American approach.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, like, we need to extend our railway networks, even if in the short run they are not making us the profit, because this is how Amtrak does it. Amtrak does run a couple of loss-making routes, but they equalize and cover it by their Northeastern corridor. And this is natural. This is a part of business. This is how it is going to be. And eventually, those loss-making sector, as we grow further into it and the perception of the American consumer market changes, those loss-making sectors and these routes will be changed to a profitable route. At least this is what a long-term strategy should look like.
Okay, yeah, thanks. That sounds good. And you always slipped to the next topic, technologies.
Yes.
So what can you report from the technology point of view?
Well, Thomas, because of technologies, I think a railway has a second opportunity. You say you mess up one part of your life, but there is a second part where you can redeem yourself. And with the help of technology, I truly believe that the railway industry in North America can redeem itself, reposition itself, and rebrand itself. So how can we look at technology combining railways and the digitalization of the whole industry? Is that with the Internet of Things, or the industrial Internet of Things, we can really shift from manual data entries with inefficiencies to collect data in a much more intelligent, in a much more sophisticated, and a much more accurate way from the rolling stock or the tracks or the information to signal a train or a certain asset, which was not the case previously. Previously, asset management was done towards time intervals. So let's say we have a rail rolling stock that has been running for a month, and after a month there was a scheduled maintenance check that was supposed to take place. And this could have terribly gone wrong if that asset, particularly in this case, a wheel, needed a change like within 2 days. We wouldn't have known, and but because of Internet of Things and sensors, we already can monitor that assets change and say, okay, this does not require a maintenance schedule every month. Perhaps
Okay.
it needs. Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt you again, because I've got now questions from several suppliers for the rail technology, and they more or less ask, investments are definitely necessary in North America to increase the efficiency, but now the important question comes, how well is this technology harmonized around the world? So is the required North American technology in line with worldwide standards, or is it something bespoke and tailor-made?
Well, guys, honestly, if you look at the technology itself at a very foundational level, I think the technologies are very harmonized. However, in the case of North America and some certain countries, they like to have their own standards. I think this is a way of life in America. If everybody's using kilometers per hour, they want to use miles per hour. It just changes the metrics, but not the actual measurement. So I would give you an example of positive train control systems. What is positive train control system? Positive train control system is a way of controlling the train and making sure that the train is running on a safe and secured network, that it does not collide or derails. The same idea, the same objective we are trying to achieve in Europe is with a different name, with some specifications that could be changed, which we call the European Train Control Systems. However, the foundation and the objectives are the same. The name and perhaps the setting of that technology is different. So America could do a better job in harmonizing a certain technology which was designed in Europe for the European market, but that could also be implemented within the North American market. So one size does not fit all, but certainly in railways, there is much more room for harmonization that could actually accelerate the process of digitalization within the railways. And I think the North American stakeholders should understand that, the basic foundation and the objective of a certain technology are going to be the same. In Europe, we want safety. In North America, they want safety. In Europe, we want our trains to be on schedule. In North America, it's the same objective they're trying to achieve. So yes, there might be some certain language or a set of regulations that compel you to change this setting of technology. However, the objective and the foundation of that technology remains the same.
Okay, so I think that was a clear answer. So let me summarize if I got it right. You say more standardization is necessary, but the good news is the objectives around the world are the same. So exactly. We want to achieve more safety, we want to trains arrive on time, and maybe a little bit more user comfort. So we want to use online tools to see if there are any delays or changes on the tracks that I can react in the right way. I think that makes absolutely sense to me.
Precisely, Thomas. As you see, RFID tags can track and trace a wagon. You can put these RFID tags in a North American rolling stock or in a European rolling stock or an Asian rolling stock. The objective is going to be the same. The objective here is either we are monitoring an asset or we are actually trying to monitor where our cargo train is positioned, when it's going to arrive at the yard, or when is it going to leave the yard, or when is it going to actually cross the border from a certain state or a country. So, like I said, like the objectives are similar. So RFID technology could be universally applicable. Then we come down to modern passenger management and ticketing solutions. With these chip cards, you can use the same chip cards in North America, Asia, or Latin America. That just creates a much more quicker and efficient flow of passengers rather than just going to the ticketing counter, paying cash, coming out of the counter, creating a traffic jam on these railway networks. And then we have traffic management systems from this technology. You don't literally have to have a train conductor to notice every movement or log the train's movement, but rather you have like a control and command system at the comfort of your office where you can actually see how the route is being set, which train is going to go where, and this basically potentially solves any potential conflicts or any derailment or possible collision. So summarizing in one word, the whole technology point of view in giving railways as a second chance is to increasingly create an ecosystem for the industry where things can be improved, things can be optimized, and things can function in a way they haven't been functioning previously, and which we can see has been the case in the railway industry in North America.
Okay, so that seems to me that the market outlook must be quite positive, because we all know the technology required to achieve the objectives from different applications in the industry. We have to reuse it then in the rail freight and passenger car business as well, to improve efficiency and achieve the objectives in North America, right?
Precisely. I'm going to present a couple of market trends and opportunities for the North American railway. I truly believe that the North American railway market has great potential that needs to be actualized and realized. I will give you a case study of the Bright Light. So the Bright Light is a train that is being operated, run, and privately owned by, East Coast Florida Industries that has made this high-speed railway network that is functioning from Miami all the way to Fort Lauderdale. And people have started using it because they have seen that this is really helping them, and the ticket prices are pretty reasonable. The other day I was checking on their website, it's just $15 one way, and two ways of the same commute is $25. So people have actually started using this Bright Line, which has been in a cooperation of Virgin Trains and the best technologies from Siemens, and using these rolling stocks. So there is a business case here. Second business case is what they're working with Japanese railways is to build a high-speed railway network within the state of Texas. Well, when we mention like the Shinkansen approaches a speed of 320 kilometers per hour. For the Americans, this would be 200 miles per hour. And what this does is that this really increases your efficiency within the state rather than being stuck in a traffic jam or waiting for the traffic to move. With these high-speed railways, you could just be within a couple of minutes from one part of the railway joined to another, and the overall commute is increasingly decreased by the help of these Japanese technology that they're finally inviting to penetrate within the North American market. Same goes for the Northeastern Corridor. Northeastern Corridor has been one of the most successful corridors and railway network for the North American market, but since the introduction of Acela service by the Amtrak, the market itself has tripled So like the passengers are being carried like between New York and Washington has greatly increased, but I still feel the northeastern corridor can be optimized because it does run into problems because of delays. It does run into problems of congestions because at times all of these railway tracks are not owned by the American state. They are sometimes owned by companies like BNSF or the Union Pacific Railways. And what they try to do is that they try to prioritize their trains over an Amtrak train. So what happens is that if you want to travel from point A to point B, you might run into delays because BNSF has decided that the priority should be given to their railway network. So in this kind of, yeah.
Vasai, one other question which fits to this topic. So again, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, sure.
Comes from an energy supplier, and it's really related to freight trains. And he is of course referring to freight trains for transporting coal. And he's saying energy supply from coal will definitely decrease in the next decade. And he said, what is really necessary to make the freight system, the rail freight system, more attractive to be competitive against really the trucks on the road? So what kind of marketing, what kind of service should the rail freight industry offer to the market to raise the awareness? I'm not sure if this goes exactly into your direction, because it's more or less a general question to a general trend. But if you can give us a short comment, that would be great.
I think the economics of railways in itself is one of the most efficient ways to transport people and goods, amongst other things. Even if the coal industry has been a major source of power generation historically, that has been changing, but we can't just base on one industry sector to actually say, okay, freight railways don't make sense anymore because the coal industry is going down. I beg to differ, because corn, barley, food products, plastic, chemicals, scrap metal, a lot of things are still being transported amongst other things within these freight rails, because just because coal industry is going down, that doesn't make sense to just totally discard freight railways, because even till this day, we do not have any better solution or an alternative to provide the cheapest, the most environmental friendly, and the most effective way to transfer goods from one coast to one another, or from south to north. So I think freight railways are still going to be very relevant, because they have been a major contribution towards the small, medium enterprises and also the large enterprises. We can also include a part of industrial railways that has gone down in the circular economy, but that needs to be improved, because revisiting this whole approach that, oh, the coal industry is going down, so the freight industry will go down as well, I beg to differ. I think because the population will increase, people will still need to consume these products, and this will only increase, and all they need to do is to just optimize their network.
I see your point, and your answer is then really diversification. So do not rely on one single item, coal in this example. So diversify and offer attractive service to other industries, and then you can simply compensate the maybe downturn on coal. And that brings us to the last fact. So what is then your forecast? So you mentioned it looking ahead. So what do you expect coming out of the North American Railroad in near future?
I think like the North Americans, or let's say not just North Americans, globally, we do not really have much choice left but to rather use our railway systems, because this is so far, or by far, the most fuel efficient mode of transportation. So it is natural that we are running towards an era that will soon finish our fossil fuels, where are we going to go then? We're obviously going to go towards electric modes of transportation. So it is natural that this railways industry needs to grow, and if it doesn't grow, I do not see any other alternative. And urbanization would require more sophisticated mass transit system, because if cars are going to fill up your roads, where are you going to drive your cars anymore because of the population, the migration from rural to urban? And once people realize that, that commuting from, let's say, Los Angeles to San Francisco is, for example, going to take them 5 hours to drive, but a high-speed railway is going to get them to the same destination from Los Angeles to San Francisco, maybe in 2.5 hours or 3 hours. So the demand will eventually increase for high-speed railways. And once they actually realize that they're saving time, because time is one commodity that cannot be renewed, and intelligent people and informed people are well aware of that this commodity is not reusable or renewed, they will eventually go towards a high-speed railway network. So in all summary, I would say the North America actually needs to invest more heavily on its railway system and stop funding or defunding a part of railway revenues and refunneling it back to the highways and roadway networks. I'm not saying that, we should all shift towards railways entirely. The transition will take time. We are going to be seeing more intermodal solutions as these things develop, but having a very solid foundation of a railway network would increase the amount of mobility, would increase the amount of mass transit, would increase the amount of efficiency within a functioning economy. Last but not least, because of climate change, even though North America, well, in particular USA, has pulled out of Paris Agreement, it still doesn't change the fact that climate change is a real issue, and trucks and automotives are one of the biggest contributors to this carbon monoxide and carbon emissions. And the only way we can solve this climate problem is by shifting our modes of transportation. At least we need to consider that this is a solution that we currently have. We just need to use it in a much better way.
Okay, Vasai, thank you. And I think you summarized it in a way that you said time is a very important asset, and time for our webinar is over. I think you did a great job, because we discussed the railway system, the existing railway system, and maybe the future railway system in North America from different viewpoints. So thank you for your explanations. Thank you for really answering these sometimes tough questions. And yeah, looking forward to get some updates on the railway systems in future. So again, thank you very much, Vasai Rashid.
Thank you.